When Poppy Nozawa stepped off the plane at LAX, the California sun felt like mockery. The same sun that once warmed her daughter's face now burned against her skin like punishment. Every sound in Los Angeles, the laughter from the terminal, the hum of distant traffic, the sterile announcements echoing off metal walls, reminded her that this was the city where Luna's story had ended far too soon. The city that took her only child and gave her back a coffin and 100 empty condolences. There was no comfort in return, no peace in homecoming. Poppy had not come back for closure. She had come for revenge. In the weeks since Luna's death, grief had transfigured her into something colder, sharper. She had wandered through Tokyo and Paris trying to escape the memory of her daughter's voice, but it clung to her like perfume that never faded. Every night, she saw Luna's face, beautiful, alive, betrayed. The official reports called it an accident, but Poppy knew better. She had watched too many people in power twist truth into theater. She had heard whispers from journalists who feared to publish what they knew, that Luna's death had roots in greed, in secrets buried beneath the polished floors of the Spencer empire. And among those who shared the blame, she believed 3 names stood above all others: Dylan, Electra, and the Spencers. Poppy began her return like a ghost, moving through Los Angeles unseen. She rented a small apartment overlooking the hills, filled with nothing but shadows and old photographs of Luna. Each night, she mapped her targets: where Dylan taught, where Electra lived, where Bill Spencer's security team patrolled. Her once gentle hands now trembled only with precision as she compiled evidence, collected schedules, traced phone records through contacts she still had in the European fashion circuit. Her calm was a mask she had perfected. Beneath it pulsed fury so quiet it could pass for poise. She started with Electra. The young woman's face was everywhere: magazines, charity events, fashion spreads. Always radiant, always adored. To the world, Electra was a survivor, the woman who had overcome loss after Luna's death. To Poppy, she was a liar living inside her daughter's stolen light. Poppy followed her for days, blending into crowds, sitting in parked cars, memorizing her patterns. She saw Electra laugh in restaurants, whisper to photographers, and touch Dylan's arm like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. Each gesture tightened something inside Poppy until love and hatred blurred beyond recognition. But vengeance is never as simple as hatred. It feeds on justification. Poppy convinced herself that what she did was justice for Luna. If the police had ignored the truth, she would expose it. If the Spencers had paid their way out of guilt, she would make them pay again. When she learned that Electra was pregnant, a secret carefully guarded by those around her, Poppy's obsession deepened. The irony of it shattered her composure. Luna had died carrying a child, a fact the public never knew, and now Electra, the woman who had betrayed her, flaunted a future that Luna would never have. In that moment, grief transformed into something feral. She sent the first letter a week later. No name, no address, only a few words. You think you're safe because the world forgot her. I didn't. Electra dismissed it at first as a cruel prank, but when the next letter arrived with a photograph, Luna and Electra together, smiling in a cafe months before the tragedy, fear began to bleed into her perfect composure. She started noticing cars following her home, strange calls that went silent when she answered. Dylan urged her to ignore it, but unease followed her like a shadow she couldn't shake. Meanwhile, Poppy turned her attention to Dylan. She remembered him well from Luna's stories, the charming collaborator, the mentor who promised her a future. But behind that charm, Poppy saw ambition. She believed Dylan had used her daughter's talent, discarded her when she became inconvenient, and concealed the truth when things spiraled out of control. Now he was rising in the same industry that had devoured Luna, speaking on ethics panels, adored by audiences who would never know what he'd done. Poppy began leaking fragments of his past to online gossip sites, anonymous tips about financial improprieties, rumors of manipulated designs. Small sparks, but enough to plant doubt. She wanted to watch his empire crumble the way hers had when the world turned on Luna. Every move she made was calculated, but inside her the lines between justice and cruelty blurred. She spent long nights staring at Luna's last text message, wondering if her daughter would forgive her for what she was doing, or hate her for what she had become. There were moments, fleeting but real, when Poppy questioned whether vengeance would bring peace. But every time she tried to pull back, she saw Luna's lifeless face in her mind and felt that monstrous resolve flood back stronger. She convinced herself that mercy was a luxury the guilty didn't deserve. The Spencers, however, were a different beast. Their influence reached everywhere. Bill Spencer's control over the media made it nearly impossible for Poppy to confront them directly. Instead, she infiltrated the periphery: employees, assistants, publicists, people with access but no power. She charmed them, manipulated them, extracted fragments of information about upcoming projects, financial transactions, private meetings. Slowly, a picture began to form. A hidden deal between the Spencer Foundation and Dylan's company, an agreement signed days before Luna's death. It was enough to fuel her rage and confirm what she had long suspected, that Luna had been silenced to protect their profit. Her next steps turned darker. She began to leave traces, scraps of Luna's handwriting left on Electra's doorstep, anonymous emails sent to Dylan's colleagues, photographs slipped under Bill Spencer's office door showing his son with Luna. Her attacks were psychological, designed to unnerve, to make them feel watched. Within weeks, paranoia spread among them. Electra hired private security. Dylan stopped attending public events. Bill doubled the guards at his estate. And still, Poppy was invisible, everywhere and nowhere at once. Yet vengeance has a hunger of its own. The more Poppy fed it, the more it demanded. She began visiting the cemetery at night, speaking to Luna's grave as if updating her daughter on progress. She told herself she was protecting Luna's memory, but her reflection in the marble told another story, a mother consumed by obsession, losing the last fragments of herself. Still, she continued, unable to stop. When she discovered that Electra's pregnancy was at risk due to stress, she felt a flicker of satisfaction, and then shame. The realization that she had become what she despised nearly broke her. For the first time, she questioned whether she was honoring Luna or desecrating her. Then, unexpectedly, Poppy received a message, an anonymous email containing a video file. It showed Luna's final moments at the studio, footage from a security camera the authorities had claimed was erased. In the video, Luna argued with someone partially off-screen, a woman wearing a distinctive bracelet. Poppy froze the frame, zoomed in. The bracelet was identical to one Electra often wore. Her heart stopped. Everything she had believed, every suspicion, solidified into certainty. The guilt, the rumors, the betrayal, all of it pointed back to Electra. Fury returned with clarity. Poppy no longer wanted justice through exposure. She wanted confession. She began planning her final act, a confrontation that would end everything. On a stormy night, she followed Electra to an abandoned production warehouse where the young woman had gone for a private meeting with Dylan. Poppy waited in the shadows, rain soaking through her coat, the city's lights bleeding through cracks in the metal walls. When Electra emerged alone, Poppy stepped forward, the ghost made flesh. What happened inside that building would later be pieced together only from fragments, shattered glass, a toppled camera stand, blood on the concrete. Witnesses heard shouting, a scream, the sound of something breaking. When police arrived, both women were gone. Hours later, Electra was found unconscious near the riverbank, her bracelet missing, her body bruised but alive. Of Poppy, there was no trace. Some said she fled, others believed she fell into the water and was carried away. But the story did not end there. Days later, a package arrived at Bill Spencer's office containing the same video Poppy had received, along with a handwritten note. The truth never dies. You just buried it. The footage, once verified, confirmed that Luna's death had indeed been the result of negligence during a cover-up ordered to protect the partnership between Dylan's firm and the Spencer Foundation. The scandal erupted across every media outlet. Careers ended overnight. Dylan was indicted. Bill's empire trembled. And Electra, recovering in a hospital bed, realized that the very woman who had tried to destroy her had, in the end, freed her from the lies she'd been living under. Weeks turned into months. The world moved on, but the shadow of Poppy remained. Some claimed to see her in Paris, others in Bangkok. Every rumor felt like her ghost reminding them that some debts are never paid. For Electra, guilt became her inheritance. She dedicated herself to Luna's foundation, channeling her fortune into art scholarships under Luna's name, perhaps an act of penance, perhaps of gratitude. Dylan's name faded from the industry. The Spencers rebuilt, but something in Bill's gaze changed, haunted by the thought that power had finally met its match in a mother's grief. In the quiet aftermath, Los Angeles seemed different. The glamour dimmed, replaced by an awareness of how thin the line between vengeance and justice truly was. Somewhere, Poppy might still be alive, living under another name, carrying the unbearable weight of both triumph and loss. Her mission had ended, but her soul was fractured beyond repair. She had avenged her daughter, but in doing so, she had exiled herself from everything human. Yet in the stillness of night, perhaps she found peace at last, not in the ruin she caused, but in the truth she revealed. Because for Poppy Nozawa, there was never redemption without revelation, and there was never love without sacrifice. The city that once took everything from her now carried her legend like an open wound, a reminder that even in the world of the powerful, grief can rise from the ashes, unyielding and unstoppable, until it consumes everything in its path. The weeks that followed that fractured Thanksgiving were a slow disintegration masked as normalcy. Brooke told herself that love required patience, that Ridge's distance was temporary, that a man like him, one who had built entire empires on passion, could not simply fall out of love. Yet, as the Christmas season gave way to the new year, that belief became harder to sustain. Ridge was there in body, but not in spirit. Every conversation felt rehearsed, every smile forced. He lingered longer at the office, and when he was home, his mind was somewhere else, somewhere Brooke suspected, but refused to name aloud, for fear that naming it would make it real. Taylor, meanwhile, struggled under the weight of her own conscience. The fight at Forrester Creations replayed in her mind like a film she couldn't turn off. She hadn't intended to reignite old feelings, but Ridge's presence had stirred something she had buried for years, a longing not just for him, but for the family they once were. Her professional calm was slipping. Even in therapy sessions with her patients, she found herself lost in thought, hearing her own advice echo back like hypocrisy. She had always told others to let go of the past, to find peace through acceptance. Yet here she was, standing in the ruins of her own restraint, wondering whether she had ever truly stopped loving Ridge. Ridge himself was caught between two women who represented two halves of his existence. Brooke was the fire, the storm that had defined his adult life, a love that consumed and renewed in equal measure. Taylor was the calm, the steady heartbeat that reminded him of who he was before the chaos. He wanted both, but life had taught him the cruelty of wanting. Each time he tried to choose one, he betrayed the other, and in doing so, he betrayed himself. The older he grew, the more he realized that his life had become a repetition of choices that never led to peace, only to pauses between wars. The real fracture came not from passion but from silence. Brooke, desperate to prove that her suspicions were unfounded, began to dig for reassurance. She checked Ridge's messages, questioned Steffi's casual mentions of her father's visits, and even reached out to Taylor under the pretense of reconciliation. Taylor, though wary, agreed to meet, hoping that peace might still be possible. But their lunch at Il Giardino quickly unraveled. Brooke's words, carefully chosen at first, turned sharp the moment Sheila appeared again, this time delivering a friendly greeting that sent a chill down Brooke's spine. Sheila's seemingly harmless mention of how Taylor's compassion had saved her life became the match that reignited the fire. Brooke's voice trembled as she accused Taylor of manipulating Deacon and Ridge simultaneously, of orchestrating every emotional shift in her favor. Taylor denied it, her calm cracking under the weight of the accusation. "I've never needed to manipulate anyone to have Ridge's heart," she said quietly, but Brooke heard only arrogance. When she left the restaurant, the words still echoed in her head, twisting into proof of everything she feared. That night, Ridge returned home to find Brooke pacing, her eyes red from crying. When she confronted him, demanding to know where he truly stood, his silence was her answer. He loved her, yes, but love wasn't enough anymore. The honesty of that realization shattered something between them that no apology could repair. Brooke's tears turned into fury, her fury into resignation. For the first time in years, she didn't beg him to stay. She simply whispered, "If you walk out that door, don't come back." Ridge hesitated, but when he left, she knew it was not just for the night. He went to Taylor. Not out of triumph or passion, but exhaustion. Her home in Malibu was quiet, filled with the smell of sea salt and the sound of waves that reminded him of simpler times. When she opened the door and saw him standing there, she didn't speak. He stepped inside, the silence between them heavier than any declaration. In that stillness, they both knew what had happened, the inevitable return of a connection that neither time nor distance had erased. Steffi was overjoyed, though cautious. She had always believed her parents belonged together, but even she could see the fragility in her father's eyes. Taylor's happiness was tinged with guilt. She had not fought for Ridge, but neither had she stopped him. Forrester Creations became a reflection of this tension. The family divided quietly, those who sided with Brooke and those who supported Ridge's reunion with Taylor. Even Hope, Brooke's daughter, struggled to mask her disappointment, especially as it began to affect her own relationship with Steffi at work. Brooke, however, refused to become a victim of history. She had rebuilt herself before, and she would again. But this time, her pain turned inward. She became quieter, more calculating, her kindness now edged with steel. Friends who visited her found her poised, distant, and frighteningly composed. She focused on her brand, on her image, telling herself that success was the only armor left. Yet late at night, when the house was empty and her reflection stared back at her from the glass, she whispered Ridge's name as if it were both prayer and curse. Sheila, ever the opportunist, saw the cracks widening and stepped closer to the chaos. She visited Taylor under the guise of friendship, feeding her insecurities with false kindness. "You deserve happiness," she said. "You've earned this." At the same time, she whispered to Brooke through intermediaries, sending anonymous messages about Ridge and Taylor's secret plans. Her manipulation was elegant. Two women pushed toward emotional collapse, Ridge caught between them, the Forrester family once again at her mercy. It all came to a head at Forrester Creations' New Year's Gala. The event was meant to symbolize unity and renewal, but it quickly became the stage for public unraveling. Brooke arrived in a white gown, radiant and defiant. Taylor stood across the room, elegant in black, the contrast between them almost theatrical. Ridge tried to keep peace, but tension buzzed like static. When Sheila, invited by Deacon under questionable pretenses, approached with champagne in hand, the sight of her triggered everything Brooke had suppressed. In front of the entire room, Brooke confronted Taylor again, accusing her of conspiring with Sheila to destroy her marriage. Gasps echoed, cameras flashed, and Ridge stood frozen as the two women tore through decades of resentment in front of everyone. Taylor's voice broke when she insisted she had done nothing wrong, that she had only ever tried to protect their family. But Brooke's pain had become too sharp, too consuming. "You protect what you love," she spat, "and you never stopped loving him." When it was over, Ridge walked away, not with Brooke, not with Taylor, but alone. He needed to breathe, to think, to remember who he was outside of the triangle that had defined his life. Both women watched him go, each knowing that the man they loved was slipping further into a kind of solitude that neither of them could reach. In the weeks that followed, Los Angeles buzzed with gossip. Fashion columns speculated about the Forrester family's collapse. Tabloids ran photos of Brooke looking haunted, of Taylor looking lost. Even the Forrester name, long synonymous with power and prestige, became entangled with whispers of scandal. And yet, beneath all the wreckage, there lingered something unresolved, a heartbeat that refused to die. Ridge found himself driving the Pacific Coast Highway at night, torn between regret and relief. Brooke threw herself into work, launching a new fragrance that she named Reclaim. Taylor volunteered at a rehabilitation center, helping women find healing through art therapy. They all pretended to move forward, but in the quiet moments, when the world fell away, they still thought of one another. Ridge's absence became its own kind of presence. Both women began to wonder whether the real enemy had never been each other, but the endless repetition of love tangled with pride. Still, neither could let go completely.
Not yet.
The Forrester saga was far from over. There would be another encounter, another misunderstanding, another chance at redemption or destruction. Because in the world of passion and legacy, nothing ever truly ends. The fire between Brooke, Ridge, and Taylor would continue to burn, reshaping itself again and again, as eternal as desire itself.
Oh.